Hello, I'm Peter J. Radomski. This is number 0854, The Stuph File Program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuph File Program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuph File Program. But it's a very special edition of the Stuph File Program. Yes, I know last week there was a very special show too, our annual Meshach and Malik Christmas special, but this show is another perennial. It's our year-ending best-of show that features just a small variety of some of the great guests that we had in 2025. There won't be any Stuph File news stories this week. It's just going to be snippets of past conversations. We'll also revisit a favorite idiot of the day at the end, crowning them the idiot of the year. The guest slater, the person who told you that this was show number 0854, was Peter J. Radomski, a friend who has been a stand-up comedian and the host of burlesque shows. Thanks, Peter, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuph File Program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get to the show! We start off with a boyhood crush of mine. I have been in love with actress Stephanie Powers from the time I was little and saw her in the 1960s television series The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. Well, one of my dreams came true back on show number 0804. It was to celebrate the 45th anniversary of her most popular show, Heart to Heart. It gave me a chance to talk about her film and stage career, her animal activism, and of course, it also gave me a chance to fanboy out on her just a little bit. Here is part of that conversation now. I first fell in love with you, and was a deep love, by the way, when you were the girl from U.N.C.L.E.
Oh, God. Well, thank you. I'm thrilled. It was my first foray into television because I had done a couple of little parts on episodic television up till then. But, you know, in the days when you were under contract to a studio, as I was in the twilight of the studio system, I wasn't allowed to do television. But as that progressed, the studios were all divesting themselves of the contracts that they had with actors, which was their kind of moniker. They had a stable of stars, and they had a stable of actors that they were grooming into the stars that they would then loan out and make more money on. So there was a very robust system that created Hollywood. And then it fell apart, largely due to the United States government saying that it was a monopoly. Sort of like Apple today, but they don't do anything about Apple. They did a lot about the movie studios. They made them divest of their holdings. Prior to that divestment, they made the product, distributed the product, and exhibited the product in chains of cinemas. At the time, that was considered a monopoly. We now know that we are surrounded by monopolies, so it doesn't make much sense to us. But that was the end of a vibrant industry, and an industry which we're still living off of in its memory. In any event, the girl from U.N.C.L.E., they sold me, Columbia sold me to MGM to do the girl from U.N.C.L.E. At the time, you know, an hour's television series had never had a woman starring in the title role. I guess it was a monumental moment, although we didn't make very much of it at the time. And I was only reminded of it a few years ago when PBS was doing a special program on so-called pioneers of television. And I was called and they said, would you join us? And I said, well, I'm hardly a pioneer. But they said, oh, no, the girl from U.N.C.L.E. was the very first time that a female had been the star of an hour-long television series.
You've also had an extensive stage career and also a film career. But one of my favorite movies was when you played Lee Remick's kid sister in Experiment in Terror.
That was the first movie under contract to Columbia. That was Blake Edwards directing and Ross Martin playing the villain. He was scary, wasn't he?
Oh, he was very scary.
Yes, and that was a kind of baptism of fire, but at the same time, I was treated so well by Blake. He was such a great director. He knew how to manipulate this rather, I think I was, 16, 17? Yeah, I had my 17th birthday on that movie. Yeah. So I was 16 years old, and he knew how to handle me. He was able to get a performance out of me.
Well, let's flash forward to Heart to Heart. It's been 45 years since that show first went on the air. How did you get the role of on that particular show of Jennifer Hart? You know, you had been in some series before that. Again, The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. and Feather and Father. And
No. Let me just explain a little bit about Hollywood in the days that I was growing up.
Yeah.
It was a very, very small town. And one way or another, everybody's lives seemed to crisscross. It was, yes, very much an industry town. Everybody and their brother knew somebody who worked in the industry and maybe knew a lot of people who worked in the industry or maybe worked in the industry themselves. So it was not unusual to receive a phone call from Robert Wagner, Tom Mankiewicz, and Aaron Spelling, because I knew them all extremely well. Aaron Spelling had been the coach of our girls' softball team in the Hollywood League. Robert Wagner, I had done an episode of It Takes a Thief, and then Tom Mankiewicz I practically grew up with. It was not an unusual phone call. That was the phone call to ask whether or not I'd be interested in coming and joining them to play Robert Wagner's wife in Heart to Heart, which was really explained to me by being more or less in the genre of the Thin Man movies. Do you remember the Thin Man movies?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, and William Powell, and I think they did 6 of them, if I'm not mistaken. And that was going to have that stylish, wonderful flow. But at the same time, I was in the midst of doing a production of Cyrano de Bergerac with Stacy Keach. We were opening out of town in San Francisco, and we were supposed to go to New York. You know, it was an embarrassment of riches. And Aaron Spelling said, well, look, I think there might be a newspaper strike in New York. No play would ever come into New York to open in New York when there was a newspaper strike because there was no way to publicize it or to publicize the critic. So all I can say is that was the happiest newspaper strike of my life. And I'm thrilled that the newspapers went out on strike because I was able to do the pilot of Heart to Heart.
That's just a snippet of a much longer conversation with actress Stephanie Powers. Yes, all my dreams have come true. You can go back and hear the full interview on show number 0804, and there is a slideshow and clip version of that interview on my YouTube page. On show number 0805, we spoke to David Samuels, the editor and co-founder of County Highway, a magazine styled as a 19th century American broadsheet. We talked about conspiracy theories, and I was surprised to hear him say that the very founding of America was based on a conspiracy theory. You wrote an article called Conspiracy Nation, How Americans Became Addicted to Conspiracy Theories and Why It Won't Go Away Anytime Soon, and Why Censorship Only Makes It Worse. What made you write the article in the first place?
Let's back up a moment and say that America itself, the United States of America, was founded on the basis of a conspiracy theory. The conspiracy theory was that King George III was engaged in a dark plot against the liberties of North American colonists, and that in turn, that plot to deprive the colonists of their liberties as Englishmen was only the precursor to a much more general plot to deprive all Englishmen of their liberties and fasten a kind of royal dictatorship on England. Now, none of that was true. And in fact, there is a wonderful book called The Ordeal of Thomas Hutchison, written by the Harvard historian Bernard Bailyn, in which he details the work of the royal governor of Massachusetts, Thomas Hutchison, as he sort of faces this mounting hysteria from the colonists, all of whom are sure that King George is engaged in this plot. And he says, no, there's no plot against your liberties. And no, England is not being turned into a dictatorship. And they won't believe him. And there's actually nothing he can do to convince the colonists otherwise. So that's number one. It's deep in our DNA. It's encoded in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, which is a thing that, European nations conspicuously lack. And it's there because the belief was that the government is plotting to make slaves of us all. So this is encoded in the country's DNA from its founding. That's reason number one. Reason number two is distrust of the state. And the term conspiracy theory itself gives you a clue as to when that really kicked off in American life, which was the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The Warren Commission was assembled, these notables in American life, to convince Americans very quick that Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone gunman. He had acted alone. That was the Warren Commission's lone gunman theory, which is the basis of the Warren Commission report. The Warren Commission encountered substantial public resistance to its claims. And today, somewhere around 70% of Americans do not believe the Warren Commission report's conclusion. In the face of that public skepticism, I believe it was someone in the CIA who invented the term conspiracy theory. Now, on the surface, it was just an equivalence. There was the lone gunman theory, he acted alone, and the conspiracy theory, which meant that he acted with others. However, the term conspiracy was very cunningly chosen to make the people who believed in that theory seem nuts. And that's where the modern term conspiracy theory comes from.
Okay, well, let's deal on the, you just mentioned the Warren Commission. You said 70% of people do not believe the Warren Commission. Is that correct?
Correct. As of now, I think as of 2023, the last time I saw a poll, I think it was 71% believe that it is likely or highly likely that Lee Harvey Oswald did not act alone. So a vast majority of Americans think the Warren Commission was a lie, right?
Is that a number? Is that a number that has been constant, or has it been growing? Has it changed?
That's a great question. The answer is that it's been growing, and part of the reason it's been growing is the third reason, which is the collapse of the mainstream press in America due to the coming of the internet and social media, and then the use of what remained of the mainstream press as a sort of government propaganda apparatus, and the censoring of social media. And the sort of overt attempts at censorship, which we've not really seen in this country since World War II, really put the final nail in the coffin of the credibility of the mainstream press. People looked at the mainstream press as a organ of government propaganda, which it became, and as something that was being censored by the government. And they looked at the government as a thing that they distrust. And so the combination of that historical propensity to believe in conspiracy theories, the increasing lack of faith in the federal government, and the collapse of 20th century media structures have all brought about a state of affairs in which conspiracy theory is simply the way people communicate what they think happened, because they don't believe that they can know from, formerly reliable sources what actually did happen.
That was a snippet of an interview with David Samuels, the editor and co-founder of County Highway. In that clip, he mentioned the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Well, we have another take on that one with someone who has been a guest multiple times. Former incarcerated gangster Louis Ferrante, who has written a trilogy on the mafia. The first book was Borgata, Rise of Empire, A History of the American Mafia. The second book in the series is called Borgata, Clash of Titans, A History of the American Mafia. He shared his thoughts about the Kennedy assassination on show number 0806. You've mentioned the Kennedy assassination several times now, and I'm just wondering, the Warren Commission came out with their theory being that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gunman and he was the only one involved. You've mentioned it several times. Are you saying that the mafia is somehow involved at a deeper level?
They certainly are. There's a tremendous amount of evidence that FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover overlooked, disregarded. Hoover concluded that Oswald, the moment after Jack Ruby shot Oswald, Hoover knew and had mentioned privately that this is a typical mob hit, silencing somebody who might talk. Although publicly he said Oswald was a lone nut and Ruby was another lone nut who just happened to shoot Oswald. That was the public stance. And there was a lot of reasons, I get deep into them in the book, for Hoover to take that stance. I think that big people in big positions have the national and international chessboard in their minds at all time, whereas a small guy like myself just wants to hear the truth. But those people have to consider other things. So there were reasons why Hoover wanted to cover it up. And then as far as the conclusions drawn by the Warren Commission, interestingly, the same conclusion that Hoover drew within 20 minutes of Oswald's death are the exact identical conclusions the Warren Commission drew months later when they concluded their quote-unquote extensive report. And the reason being is that Hoover controlled the evidence that the Warren Commission would see. The Warren Commission was an investigative body, but not a law enforcement body. So they had no access to investigative evidence that would have to be obtained from Hoover. So Hoover then played a dirty game, as far as I was concerned, with regard to what he showed them and what he didn't, what he told them and what he didn't, what he chose to hold back. Also, the CIA director, he'd been ousted by John F. Kennedy, Allen Dulles. Allen Dulles was a CIA director, and he got thrown out by Kennedy, or kind of forced to resign, after the Bay of Pigs invasion, which was sort of a debacle, they felt like. Most people did. Felt like we left the Cuban exiles stranded on the beach when they were attempting to overrun Castro and retake their tiny island in the name of democracy again. Well, after Dulles was gone, Dulles was sort of really, really bitter against the Kennedys. He felt like they dropped the ball and blamed it on him. At some point or another, Dulles becomes also a major part of the Warren Commission. It's proven that he was working hand in hand with the mafia to assassinate Castro. And he did not want that to come out and the American public to hear about that the CIA was working hand in hand with the mafia to kill a foreign leader. So he worked very closely with all of the other people on the Warren Commission to make sure that those CIA secrets stayed secrets for a long time. And they only came out, maybe 15 years later during the House Assassinations Committee, which I mentioned at the top of our interview, which is in later on, 1978, 1979.
That was part of a double segment with former gangster Louis Ferrante, author of a trilogy on mafia history. By the way, the third and final book of the trilogy is called Borgata, Autumn of Empire, A History of the American Mafia. And it comes out late in 2026. You can go back to show number 0806 to hear that double segment, and if you think he has thoughts on the JFK assassination, then go back and listen to the segment where he feels that the RFK assassination in 1968 of the president's brother was mobbed up too. Again, there is a slideshow and clip version of that double interview on my YouTube page. And the link will be on our website at thestufffile.com. Just go to that page for this show, which is number 0854, and you'll be able to find the link to that video. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
And now, Dad Joke Theater.
What do you call a kid who doesn't believe in Santa? A rebel without a clause.
Join us again for another Stuff File program, Dad Joke Theater.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like. But the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
I'm standing Nova Scotia proud for Canada. This is Anne Murray. Early in my career, I received a lot of pressure to move to the U.S., but I just couldn't do it. Canada was my safe haven, my light at the end of the tunnel, and it still is. Buy Canadian. Shop as if your country depends upon it. Keep your money in Canada for Canada.
Here's a penny for your thoughts from the Stuff File program, coming to you from Montreal, Canada, a country that doesn't have pennies.
This is a special best-of edition of the Stuff File program, looking back at snippets of some of the conversations we've had over the year. Have you ever thought of getting married in a jail? Or spending your first night in holy matrimony canoodling in a cell? A former prison in New Brunswick is now the Dorchester Jail Bed and Breakfast. Earlier in the year, they made the news because a wedding took place in the former prison that was built in 1875. The owners of the Dorchester Jail are Natasha Marsh and Bill Steele, and we talked to Natasha back on show number 0821 during their flurry of press attention. You must be getting a lot of attention just because of it.
We certainly are. It was our first ever wedding, and we actually don't even know the brides.
But besides that, you opened up this bed and breakfast a little while ago, and though you had the first wedding there, it's not the first time that people spent their first night as a couple in your bed and breakfast.
So we've had at least 8 brides and grooms come and spend their first night of holy matrimony here with us. They had to start their life sentence off right, and there's no better place to do that than in jail.
So how did the bed and breakfast come about in the first place?
So we purchased the jail in 2017. My husband, he's quite eclectic. He likes some kind of different things there, macabre things and morbid things. So when we first bought the jail, we weren't too sure what we were going to do with it. We knew we wanted to live here in the jail, but we didn't know what we wanted to do with the rest of the space. So we just joked with each other, like, you know what? We can't be the only crazy people that might want to spend a night in jail. Like, let's try a bed and breakfast. 2017, our first summer, we were sold out essentially every night. That's when we kind of thought that we had something.
I'm sure it was very, very popular when you first started, but then you must have hit head on the pandemic.
Oh, yes.
So what was that like for you?
Fortunately, the way that the building is structured, we were still able to have guests through for the B&B experience, but we were only able to have one family or one couple through at a time, which made things a little difficult. But there was so much interest for people to come and stay that it really encouraged us to keep the doors open.
This is a former prison that was built in 1875. So what kind of renovations did you have to do in order to make this an accommodating bed and breakfast?
So my husband and I, we've tried to keep the building as original as we possibly can. They certainly don't make them like this anymore. We put smoke detectors in each of the cells, and we disabled the locks in the cells where people sleep so we don't have any accidents or have anyone staying any longer than they might want to. Pardon me, we updated a little bit of the electrical and the plumbing into our residence. So we actually live in the part of the building where the warden and his family used to live.
So when people stay in the cells, I mean, there's one thing that is common to most jails in that there really isn't any privacy. There's bars and you can't get out, but there's no privacy. What have you done to give a modicum of privacy to people who are enjoying the bed and breakfast experience?
We do provide each of our cells with a privacy curtain. Of course, it's black and white striped. We've got the aesthetic here. A lot of people, they really enjoy the experience. especially when there is other people in the cells, like down the hallway and stuff. It really gives that real jail vibe. And we find a lot of people down in the common area kind of reminiscing and enjoying the experience together. So it's nice to see people can have a bit of camaraderie in the jail as well.
There are some people who have, shall we say, a notorious history for being in that particular prison. I mean, the prison itself has a notorious history. I guess one of the biggest stories that people talk about are the Bannister brothers. They were hung at the jail for the murder of 3 members of the same family in Moncton. Do people come and visit because of the lore of what took place in that jail?
Arthur and Daniel Bannister were actually hung inside of the jail on September 23rd, 1936. But they still had singular hangings here up in the jail up until 1964. Definitely, it's one of the most infamous, or some of the most infamous inmates that were ever housed and executed here. Very sadly, as a parent, this kind of breaks my heart, but the boys were essentially hung because of their mother, because they were asked to do their mother's dirty work for her.
Wow. And so did she get away with this, or was she convicted herself?
No, she was also incarcerated here for a short period of time.
Okay.
At that period of time, the jail was co-ed, so it used to house men and women until about the 60s. So she was also incarcerated here, and they were actually all in the same hallway together. So the female inmates were actually housed in the death row hallway. So she was 20 feet away from where her sons were being held in death row.
Wow. And when did the jail close exactly?
So the jail's only been closed for about 27 years. It closed in 1998.
The people in the area, I bet when they closed the jail, they never thought it would become a bed and breakfast.
I don't think so. We gave him a shock.
From show number 0821, that was Natasha Marsh, co-owner of the Dorchester Jail Bed and Breakfast in New Brunswick. Okay, so you might not be interested in spending your vacation on Canada's East Coast in a jail. But if you are ever traveling to Prince Edward Island, you might want to stop by the Canadian Potato Museum, located in O'Leary, PEI. Back on show number 0835, we spoke to the manager, Donna Rowley. You really can't miss the Canadian Potato Museum because there's a giant potato outside.
There is. Yes, there is. That potato's been standing there since 1997.
How did it get there? Like, who decided we need a giant potato?
So the Potato Museum itself opened in 93. Just a little backstory, the Community Museum of O'Leary is kind of what it consisted of. And there was a small little display about the potato industry in that little exhibit. And someone just in passing mentioned, and it was literally just a small conversation they had, is such a small display about potatoes, and the industry is so big on the island, you would think there would be a larger exhibit somewhere. And literally that's kind of what planted the seed, if I want to say that, of starting the Potato Museum. So long story short, they opened Potato Museum in 93. And then again, somebody had a conversation with one of our economic development officers, Eva Rodgson is her name. And it was just a local farmer that said, we should have something for people to take a photo of when they come to that museum. We should have a giant potato somewheres in O'Leary. They didn't really know where they were going to put it, but eventually it did land on our doorstep, basically. So it is probably the most photographed iconic structure in O'Leary that people take a photo of before they enter the museum. That's kind of how that came about.
Now, I understand that O'Leary has less than 1,000 people, and your Canadian Potato Museum attracts thousands.
We did. Last year was a record for us. We hit almost a 20,000 visitation for traffic for the museum, which is the highest in all the years that I've worked there. When I originally started, seems like 100 years ago sometimes, but traffic was probably under 3,000 people would come through the museum, and it's literally increased its visitation over those years. Up to last year was just under 20,000. So
when one goes to the Canadian Potato Museum, what can you expect to see? What's the big attraction that is there that draws the people in?
So the museum itself is based on history, and it is an educational museum. We have an interpretive center that kind of walks you through a little bit of the the history behind the humble potato, we'll say, kind of where it began and kind of how it made its way to Prince Edward Island itself and as well to Canada. And we also have a huge display of antique farm equipment that we've been collecting over the years, and we're probably still collecting. A lot of it's made in PEI, farming equipment, made in Canada, and we do have some international equipment there as well. So it is very educational. We also have a gift shop, of course, with some quirky potato items that people can buy that perhaps they can't find anywhere else. And we also have kept our local community museum. So that museum will always be part of the building, and it still showcases the history of O'Leary itself. So,
okay, define quirky potato memorabilia.
Well, we have anything from like a plush potato to a stress ball potato to a potato that's been crocheted into like a zipper pull. I saw tablecloths, aprons. I'm off the top of my head now. I should probably just walk around and have a look while I'm talking to you. But anything and everything from a coffee mug to, a tablecloth or a table runner or even the microwavable bags that you would cook a potato in the microwave. So not the entire gift shop is made of potato items. We do have a lot of local artisans that come in there, but we try and bring in as many quirky items as we can. And people, they enjoy buying them, I believe.
Now, I understand that underneath the heading of macabre, there are miniature coffins with potatoes in them. Why is that?
The focus on that, I think, was for the pests and diseases that do affect the crop. So as you're going through the exhibit, you'll see little tiny coffins with a little potato inside that's been affected by some sort of a disease, a pest, or anything like that. So we have them kind of displayed through the exhibit. Now, it wasn't our idea to do that. This exhibit actually was donated to the museum, I think it was back in 99, and it came up from the science exhibit in Ottawa. And they were changing their display and they were looking for somewhere to rehome their exhibits. So they contacted the museum volunteer board, and some local farmers actually stored these the displays in their warehouses until the exhibit had been constructed and stuff. So we can't honestly say we came up with the idea, but I really think it's kind of a cute idea. And a lot of people actually, we've had children actually come in the other day and they only want to see the coffins that somebody else had been in and talked about. So we just let them go down and had a look at the coffins, and they thought it was pretty cool.
Okay, so let's get to the restaurant. First of all, how many different ways can you make a potato?
Oh, it's endless. I think if you can come up with any idea, it's possible to do whatever you want with a potato. Our focus on the museum is we do anything from a fresh cut fry to baked potatoes topped many different ways to we do a potato soup. We also make potato fudge. So that's iconic for us as well, to do our potato fudge, which is actually something you can sample when you come in the front door. Even before you get to buy it, you get to taste it.
Donna Rowley, manager of the Canadian Potato Museum in O'Leary, Prince Edward Island. She was on show number 0825. Okay, still with the East Coast, but down south, we head to Florida. You might want to take in the Florida Man Games. On show number 0835, we spoke to Pete Melfi, the founder and commissioner of the Florida Man Games.
So we all love those Florida Man headlines, right? I'm sure you're very familiar with the weird, wild headlines we see coming out of this state.
Not only am I aware of that, my show thrives on kicker stories, and honestly, I try to avoid some Florida stories because there's just too many of them. It's like low-hanging fruit.
That's right. Well, I got to tell you, I love the low-hanging fruit. I'm picking at that tree all the time for inspiration for new games out here at the Florida Man Games, and it's just like you said, we kind of turned those headlines into a laugh-out-loud competition. I've kind of started calling it comedy mixed with combat sports. That's really what it is. Like, the hits are real, the hits are big, but you're also laughing all day long as these Floridians put themselves in situations that only Floridians could get into.
I noticed that you have changed venues every year. That's either because you have one of three things going on. Either you are outgrowing the previous venues, you have worn out your welcome from the previous venues, or you're in the witness protection program.
Well, I wouldn't be able to tell you if it was two of those, I guess, but No, it has been a huge growth thing, man. It's been just absolutely amazing, the response that people have had in showing up to these events. The first year, we did it in a small field in downtown St. Augustine. We packed the place out with over 5,000 people who showed up for our very first event. The second year, we had over 7,000 people at a larger St. Johns County fairgrounds, and it was an absolutely wonderful venue. But to be honest, Peter, the plan has always been to kind of move this around the state of Florida and kind of give every corner of Florida a chance to get in on the action. So I'm excited. Like you mentioned, the last couple of years we've been in Northeast Florida. This year we're bringing it down to the southwest corner of Florida in Bradenton at the Freedom Factory, which it's a huge venue, stadium seating built in, Jumbotron built in, so nobody's going to have any trouble seeing the action. It's very exciting. The folks that own it, I mean, they're as Florida man as can be. So we're very excited about being down there in Bradenton for this.
Well, if you're talking about Florida man, using the analogy of a hurricane, you are in the eye of the hurricane. How much of Florida man encompasses the entire state, and also what parts have the most damage?
It's so funny because if we're talking about hurricanes, there's always a Florida man story that emerges from these hurricanes. You know, the guy who plays our national anthem, actually, Lane Pittman, he is the iconic Florida man that you see every time there's a hurricane. You see the picture of him with the American flag headbanging out in the middle of the road. So it was only natural for us to have him play the national anthem for us each and every year. And he loves it. He's had a team every year as well. I think last year we had the guy who rode out a hurricane, in his houseboat. And I'm still trying to think of how we can come up with a competition for that one, man. It would involve a large body of water. So that's been the complication there. But, I'm always trying to draw inspiration. Florida man wreaks havoc wherever he goes. It's hard to pin down a certain specific area, but being close to Tampa, Florida man does some damage in Tampa for sure. So I can't wait to see what kind of weird competitors we get coming out of the Tampa area this year.
So tell us what some of the events are in the Florida Man Games. And just off the bat, my favorite one is just reading the fact that you have an event where people evade capture from real police officers.
Yes.
So
that's our main event. That is our main event of the night. That's what everybody stays to make sure they are there for. And it is, just like you said, at the end of this event, with part of it being, throwing alligators through drive-through windows, grabbing catalytic converters off of trucks. And then the finale is they have to get in a foot chase with their stolen merchandise from an actual police officer. And our partnership with the St. Johns County Sheriff has been amazing over the last couple of years. The police love being a part of this event. And so I'm excited to get the police from the Bradenton area in on this as well. Another one of our proud favorites that emerged last year. It was our first year doing it last year, and we're definitely bringing it back this year. You and I talk about hurricanes. We have the Hurricane Party Prep Grocery Aisle Brawl. And this is where our Florida man competitors are literally fighting each other for the last of the hurricane supplies on the shelf. And whoever has the most supplies and the most valuable supplies in their cart by the end of this brawl takes that match. I mean, it's really a Florida version of Supermarket Sweep. As Florida as you could possibly imagine Supermarket Sweep being.
Pete Melfi, founder and commissioner of the Florida Man Games. He was on show number 0835. Again, there is a slideshow and some actual footage that accompanies that interview on our YouTube page. The link will be on our website at thestufffile.com. Just go to the page for this show, which is show number 0854, and you'll find the link to the video. You're listening to the Stuph File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Giving you something to think about. This is Morning Shower Thoughts.
Ever notice that the loudest word often shouted is the word quiet?
Morning Shower Thoughts from the Stuph File program.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestufffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestufffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuph File coming your way in just a few moments.
Here's a brief word about our show and my book. If you become a regular Patreon patron of the Stuph File program, I'll give you an e-version of my book, Great Conversations, My Interviews with Two Men on the Moon and a Galaxy of Stars. It's easy to do. Just go to patreon.com and become a patron to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. So, join Patreon and claim your copy of Great Conversations, My Interviews with Two Men on the Moon and a Galaxy of Stars. Sign up at patreon.com/The Stuph File Program.
You're listening to the Stuph File Program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Welcome back to our annual Best of show. On show number 0832, we spoke with award-winning Argentinian composer Rod Sheckman. He was the co-creator, along with legendary composer Lalo Schifrin, of a large-scale symphonic composition called Long Live Freedom, a 40-minute symphony for 100 musicians. Here is part of that interview now. You are an Argentinian maestro. So was Lalo. Obviously, Lalo was a lot older than you. What kind of influence did he have on your career path? And also, what was it like when you first met him?
Those are great questions. It all began with a phone call from Los Angeles. I was in Buenos Aires. To get in touch with Lalo, it was very difficult, and I had to win the World Cup of Classical Music in Vienna before we actually met. So many years of doing the music career and finally competing against the best composers from 32 countries in Vienna, I was declared the world winner representing Argentina. And Lalo Schifrin, he left Argentina when he was about 22, and he was 91 when we got in touch. But he missed Argentina, and he was composing for Argentina, and he was creating pieces and connecting with Argentina. So Argentina was something pending and very important for him. After I became the front page of newspapers, he found about me and that I was also representing Argentina, and that's how we connected with his idea of composing a great masterwork, a symphony, 40 minutes for 100 musicians, dedicated to our country and to the value of freedom and liberty. And we composed together Long Live Freedom. That's how it started. It was on October of that year that I won the contest. And on February, at the end of February, I was talking for the first time with Lalo Schifrin. And he asked me and he said, I have a proposal for you. Let's co-author a masterwork and let's become partners and compose a work signed by Lalo Schifrin and Rod Sheckman, combining my film music language with your classical music language. And that's how I left Buenos Aires and moved to Los Angeles for about a year.
When he first put this idea to you, you must have been flabbergasted.
Yes, it was pretty outstanding. And actually, imagine, speaking truthfully, one thing is winning a contest, no matter how big it is, the best composers of the world. But one thing is winning a contest. And another thing is working with Lalo Schifrin. I'm 40 years old, so our distance is almost half a century. And for me, Lalo Schifrin is much more than Mission Impossible. Lalo Schifrin was a student of one of the most important composers of the century, Oliver Messiaen, who was a student of Maurice Ravel. He was also the student of Dizzy Gillespie. So for me, working with him was working with someone that had access to knowledge from the masters. It was something incredible speaking with him. And actually, when he proposed this, I didn't know what would happen. And he told me, come to Los Angeles, we'll talk about it. So I asked him, but Lalo, can you share with me something about the composition? Do you have a melody that you already wrote? Can you please share it over the phone at least? So he did share a melody. He sang it, and I recorded it. And as soon as we hung up, I transcribed the melody. It was 8 seconds. And at the beginning, the proposal was to compose a grand work for piano solo. So I played this on the piano. And I said, wait, this melody is so great that it belongs to a section of violins. It needs a whole orchestra, not just piano. And so I brought it for a whole orchestra. And I said, if this is for Argentina and it's looking big, huge, not even a normal orchestra, the biggest orchestra possible. And in Argentina, they gave us the National Symphony Orchestra, the most important of the country. And they had to hire extra musicians to cover the amount of players we needed. So I transcribed this melody and expanded it using techniques from Mozart, Beethoven, the old masters' techniques, how they developed the melodies. And when I arrived to Los Angeles, the first day, the idea of meeting Lalo Schifrin was completely crazy. I mean, I had talk over the phone, but would he be there? Would he answer me? Would the house exist? But, so many questions. Imagine traveling such a long distance to meet this Hollywood star. So it was amazing. And finally, I arrived to his house, and we go to his studio, which is at the back of his house. And when you open the door of the studio, you see the Oscar, you see 20 Grammy nominations and Emmys and letters from Clint Eastwood and the White House and photos with the most famous people you could imagine. And I'm there and I tell him, Lalo, you sang to me an 8-second melody. Here it is. Here's a recording of your voice. With this, I transcribed it and I wrote it for Grand Symphony Orchestra. And I played it. And when I played it, he went crazy. And he said, Donna, call Donna. Call my wife, Donna. Donna comes and he tells his assistant, play it again. And after that, we started working together. So that's how it all began.
That's Rod Sheckman, who, along with Lalo Schifrin, created the large-scale symphony Long Live Freedom. Go to the What's On page for our website for show number 0854, and you'll find a YouTube link where you can see the Argentinian premiere of this amazing piece. It's well worth the watch. Patreon subscribers, you can hear more of Rod in our post-interview conversation, plus you'll hear a little music as a Patreon reward extra. By the way, speaking of Lalo Schifrin, I actually had him scheduled to do an interview, but unfortunately he died at 93 on June 26th, before the date arrived. However, I did have a chance to talk with him back in 1993, ironically when the first Mission Impossible movie came out, and we talked then.
Now, years ago, I bought one of your albums entitled Towering Toccata.
Yes.
And the album, one of the reasons I bought it is because it had a television theme song from a show that didn't last that long, and that show was called Most Wanted with Robert Stack.
Yes.
And I was just curious to know, when you're writing music, when you're doing a television show, a theme song, shows come and go. I mean, you were lucky with the fact that Mission Impossible ran for 7 years on CBS. But when you're writing a theme song and you're saying, oh, good, this is great work, I'm really happy with this, you really have no idea how successful it's going to be because it's based on the fact that the show itself has to be successful. Have there been pieces of music you've written over the years for the hundreds of films and television shows you've done that you were really, really proud of but never saw the light of day because the show just died?
Yes, I am. And unfortunately, even if I would tell you the names of the shows, it wouldn't mean anything to you because some of them, they were not even bought by the networks. I have what I consider teams that they are as strong, different, but as strong as Mission Impossible, but they never seen the light of day at all because the network didn't buy it. In those days, I don't know how it's now, but in those days, either they had to buy it, or if they bought it, it was only for 13 weeks, and they saw how it was doing with the public, because the public is the one that has the last word. And there is a marriage between the music. The music is not the most important element in a show of this kind. The show has to work, and it has to be something that appeals to the audience, not only the acting, but the concept of the show and the writing of I'm talking about the writing of the screenwriter. It happens in comedy, how good the lines are and how well they are delivered and how well it's edited, and all this that doesn't mean the show is good or bad. I've been working always with professionals, but for some reason it doesn't click. All of a sudden, the heads of the network think, no, nothing is going to happen with this, let's dump it. Or sometimes they show it later on, instead of losing completely because when they invested money in a pilot, it was 1 hour. If they didn't buy it, it was lost. Later on, they decided to make the pilot 2 hours long, and in that case, they would show it anyway as a movie of the week.
Right. Now with the current film out starring Tom Cruise in the theaters, they've obviously, to a certain degree, revamped the music that you originally wrote for the television series. What do you think of what they've done to the music as you wrote it?
Oh, I think it's okay, great. I mean, I like it. I like it a lot. And Tom Cruise, I was coming back from a concert tour in Europe, and I was invited to the preview. When Tom Cruise saw me, he hugged me. This was the document. You can imagine all the television stations and all the newspapers were there. Many of them documented this. And he said to me that he grew up with Mission Impossible, and the music was one of the biggest elements that convinced him to get involved in the project, not only as an actor, but as a producer. So he made my day.
That was just a snippet of an interview that I did with Lalo Schifrin. You can hear more of it on show number 0829. This year, we also lost TV icon Loretta Swit, best known for her Emmy-winning television role as Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan on the long-running hit CBS series MASH. She died of natural causes on May 30th at 87 in her home in New York City. Back in 2017, we talked when she was promoting her book, Swit-Heart, The Watercolor Artistry and Animal Activism of Loretta Swit. But she did talk about her acting career.
I kept true to my audience and to my characters. I think I chose my roles carefully. I played strong women, empowered women, and women who were ready to grab their lives and do something essential for the goodness of man with their lives. So I knew very early on that television is a very, very powerful teacher. And it was important that my message was one I'd be proud of for the rest of my life. I get mail still. In fact, the other day I was in the middle of a phoner interview, and it was one of those that you called in, and she flat out said she was an ICU nurse because of me, because she was inspired by the work nurses do. And I have lauded nurses for years, since I know what goes into their daily lives. They are unappreciated, underpaid, neglected as a group. And yet, if ever they walk out, if ever they leave us, go on strike, we're going to be in very, very big trouble. Nurses are amazing women, and I admire them. And it was, I just finished playing Eleanor Roosevelt. It's important for me as an actor to love and admire the characters that I play, or at least have an empathy about them.
In what project did you play Eleanor Roosevelt?
That is the project. It's called Eleanor, Her Secret Journey, and it's a one-woman show, and I just did 4 shows in Laguna Beach, California, beautiful Laguna Playhouse. And I'm happy to say a lot of young people were interested, and we were sold out for all 4 performances, and they've invited me back because of the overflow and because of the interest, and that really fills my heart with joy. There's so much still to be learned from Eleanor Roosevelt.
You're in New York right now. Could you ever see yourself playing Eleanor on the Broadway stage?
It's a small piece. Yes, of course. I would be happy to do that. I think its audience is more for a smaller off-Broadway, a more intimate theater. Although I've done Shirley Valentine to 2,000-seat houses, and that's also a one-woman show. Yes, of course it could come to Broadway, absolutely. The stage is the stage. It doesn't matter where it is. I was on stage with, I think it was Shirley Valentine, and there was a cyclone warning for approximately 7 minutes before the curtain. The lights went up. Fire department people came running down the aisles, took me to a bomb shelter, the audience. We all were taken away, and I had 2 standing ovations, one when they let us out of the theater, and then I finished the play in the bomb shelter. I didn't act it so much as I told them what the rest was and explained how it ended and so forth. A stage is anywhere you have an actor and an audience. That's a stage. In prehistoric times, you had this bearded guy wearing some, hair shirt, wearing a dinosaur's robe or something, acting out something to a few people in a cave. He was telling a story. The minstrels, we've done that everlastingly from the beginning of time. We were telling stories. The Bible is that. It's telling a story to an audience, and that's what we do. So a stage, I'd love to come to Canada with it. I'd love, wherever there's an audience who's receptive to that piece, I'm there. Have Eleanor Will Travel.
That was a segment from show number 0824 featuring Loretta Swit, who died at the age of 87 back on May 30th. We also lost legendary game show host Wink Martindale at 91 back on April 15th. I had the chance to talk with him a quarter of a century ago in May of 2000. I asked him how he got his start on game shows.
Well, in 1965, I got a little tired of radio because I had been involved in the English invasion. The Beatles came over, and I was a Beatles fan, but there was one time in 1964, I believe, they had the top 5 records in the United States of America. And I just became a little disenchanted. And at the same time, I started watching a show in the summer of that year, and it really became addicted to it. Alan Ludden's Password. I thought, this is really a nice way to make a living. This guy comes in, does 5 or 10 shows a week, goes home, and comes back the next week, does 5 or 10 more. Not only does he enjoy himself, but he has fun, and they pay him for it. So I said to my agent, this is not a bad way to make a living. Why don't you send me on a game show interview? So he did, and I think it was the second interview that I went on. I actually got the show. It was called What's This Song? It was at NBC. Only lasted a year, but at least it got me started in the business, and I've done 19 shows.
19 shows. That's quite a track record.
A lot of them are forgettable, by the way.
Well, no, okay. Well, there's Tic-Tac-Dough, which is one of my favorite. There's Gambit. There's High Rollers. I remember watching these shows quite regularly. What is your favorite of the ones you've done?
I think the one that gave me the longest term of employment, to tell you the truth. I figure anything over 13 weeks in this business is a pretty doggone good gig. I did Tic-Tac-Dough for almost 8 years, and I did Gambit, the blackjack game, on CBS for 5 years, and High Rollers, 3 years on NBC. But I would say that because it was a simple game, everybody knew how to play it, and it had a good long run, Tic-Tac-Dough would have to be my favorite.
And of all the game shows you have had the opportunity to host, which one would you like to be a contestant on?
Oh, my gosh, that's a good question. I tell you the truth, my wife and I were contestants on one of our favorite shows back in the 70s that Bert Convy, the late Bert Convy, hosted. It was called Tattletales on NBC.
Right.
Between spouses to see who knew most about the other spouse. But as far as, being on a show and being a contestant, I think I would love to have not only been a contestant, but I would love to have hosted I've Got a Secret, because I thought that was a tremendous format for a game show.
And that's a brief look at the Stuph File program for 2025. Before we go, I did promise you a favorite idiot of the day to end things off. So here we are. From show number 0821, the Idiot of the Day presents the Idiot of the Year.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. This Stuph File presents the Idiot of the Day.
A man who was suspected of having vandalized a Metro Nashville police security camera has been arrested. 30-year-old Rashawn Golden was arrested in connection with the vandalism of a safety camera at a recreation area on April 16th. In addition to the vandalism charges, Golden was also charged with resisting arrest and aggravated assault on a police officer. Police said safety camera video assisted in identifying Golden and his vehicle, which led to the arrest. You know what a police safety camera does, right? It takes police pictures and video. So, why, oh why, would you try to vandalize a working police safety camera? One reason, and one reason only. You're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuph File program, number 0854. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestupffile.com. And once again, Stuph is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links in all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuph File page. Just look for the corresponding program number. And once again, that's 0854. Email me at peter@thestupffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, or you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including kdxradio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WNRHLP-FM in Newport Richey, Florida, KZZHLP-FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
Sir Dudley here. You've been listening to the Stuph File Program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. Always remember these words of wisdom. The early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese.